As Yen approached the sofa, Fu Xinqing's grip on her arms tightened, and he lifted her onto the sofa. Unintentionally, her coat was stripped off, leaving only the black dress on her body. He leaned against the sofa with Yen seated on his lap. "What was the other option he gave you?" Fu Xinqing asked with a sudden coldness in his voice. Yen calmly replied, "To sleep with you here and then." His grip on her waist tightened involuntarily, holding her midair. He asked in a chilly tone, "So, you thought the first choice was better, didn't you?" She couldn't help but sneer. "Mr. Fu, can I interpret your reaction as jealousy? If I hadn't chosen the first option, did you really want me to have sex with you in front of your subordinates, just like Fu Sui's you wanted? Would you have allowed that? Wouldn't that have been humiliating for you?" Fu Xinqing stared at her without uttering a word. Yen continued, her smile mocking, "Did you secretly wish I had chosen the second option? Could it be that you become addicted to me?" Fu Xinqing abruptly stood up, pushing her off his lap. He glanced at the TV screen and warned Yen, "This is the last time. If there's a next time, I'll make sure what's happening on the screen becomes a vivid memory for you." Yen immediately asked for her belongings, to which Fu Xinqing coldly replied, "Ask Ah Jiang for your things." She then asked, "Can I take the CD with me?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he replied, "Of course, but this is just a copy, not the original." Grace was waiting for Yen downstairs, and when Yen arrived, she asked softly, "Are you all right?" Yen didn't answer immediately, but after a few breaths, she said, "I'm sorry, your coat got dirty. I'll pay you for a new one later." Grace reassured her, saying it wasn't a problem. She hesitated for a moment, then continued, "Honestly, I see that you and we are not the same. Yet, the fact that you don't disregard my dirty coat and are willing to wear it already makes me very happy." A faint twitch appeared at the corner of Yan's lips, but she didn't say anything. During the drive back, Yen recalled what Su Qinhua had told her about Yu Jia. She thanked Grace for her assistance and asked for another favor, to keep an eye out for someone named Yu Jia. Grace asked for a photo, and Yen promised to send one to help with the search. As she got out of the car, Yen left her phone number and expressed gratitude for her help, assuring that she would find a way to repay the kindness. Before heading home, Yen discarded all the belongings that Fu Xinqing had given her and changed back into her normal clothes. Upon reaching home, she started to complain, "Yuenza, I'll be driven to madness by these students. Why are they such troublemakers nowadays? I remember we were so well behaved when we were students, right? We never caused any trouble for our teachers." Yuenza immediately hugged her and said, "Don't worry, whatever happens, take it step by step. If you can't solve it, report it to the management and escalate the issue." Yan's heart was filled with guilt and remorse, yet she maintained her smile, masking her emotions. Resting her head on his chest, she said, "Yuenza, I want to lie down for a while. I'm tired." Yuenza gently carried her to the bed, teasingly saying, "Your wish is my command, my wonderful wife." The next day, Ah Jiang informed Fu Xinqing that Yen was searching for Yu Jia through Grace and had given her a photo of Yu Jia, explaining that her family was concerned and unable to reach her. As Fu Xinqing read the book, he expressed, "I expected Yen wouldn't just sit still like this, but I didn't expect her to act so foolishly." Sister Grace said that she wanted to befriend Miss Yen because she's someone you brought in, Jiang replied calmly. Fu Xinqing pondered for a moment and then said, "Tell Sister Grace to reveal Yu Jia's whereabouts to her in 2 days. I'd like to see what she can do." Yen was attending a staff meeting at the university when she received a message from Sister Grace about Yu Jia's whereabouts. The dean tapped the table to get everyone's attention, stressing the importance of representing the university at an international economic forum without making any mistakes. At the West District of Chanyuan Villa, Sister Grace led Yen into the club and instructed her to wait in the VIP room while she contacted Yu Jia. After a while, a young and beautiful girl with long straight black hair entered the room. She appeared innocent and untainted. When she saw Yen sitting quietly on the sofa, she was visibly taken aback for a moment before she greeted her in an unnatural tone, "Teacher Yen's expression remained composed as she replied indifferently, "Come and sit down first." Yu Jia sat beside her, and as soon as she sat down, Yen said, "Don't be nervous, have some water." However, Yen suddenly interrupted her, "Were you aware of who Fu Xinqing was?" Yu Jia seemed bewildered for a moment and anxiously explained, "I didn't know, teacher I truly didn't know before. I hadn't come here yet and wasn't aware of who Mr. Fu was. A younger colleague I worked with said she could recommend me here and even help me get a leave of absence, so I was transferred here." After about 3 or 4 minutes, Yu Jia's speech gradually slowed down, her eyes seemed a bit unfocused, and she swayed slightly. Before she could finish speaking to Teacher Yen, she suddenly collapsed. Yan's expression remained unchanged. She calmly got up, removed her coat, revealing a beautiful red dress underneath. She let her hair down, and as she remembered checking Fu Suiji's social media accounts, she noticed that he was often at Chanyuan Villa. The hallway was dimly lit, and as she walked, her hips swayed gracefully. At first glance, she appeared no different from the other women there. She reached a corner and saw a waiter. Swiftly lunging, she pulled him aside and discreetly slipped a few bills into his pocket, asking with a charming smile, "Little brother, where is young Master Fu?" The waiter was momentarily taken aback but had no doubts about her identity. He whispered Fu Suiji's room number. As Yen entered the room and pushed the door open, a scene of revelry met her eyes. Everyone treated her like any other ordinary prostitute and didn't pay much attention to her. It wasn't until she quietly approached Fu Suiji and moved the woman sitting next to him that he finally noticed her. Without hesitation, Yen stuck to him, leaning close to his ear, "Young Master Fu, I have limited time, so I'll be brief. If you're interested in Fu Xinqing and Shinjijia, come and find me at this address. I'll be here for a few days. Remember, don't call me. Ask a volunteer from H University, and you'll find me." As she spoke, she slipped a note into Fu Suiji's jacket pocket. He looked at her coldly, sneering, "Miss He, I think I know far more than you." "Is that so?" She turned around to look at him after standing up. "If that's your belief, then you absolutely shouldn't come. Just pretend I was never here today." Back in the small room, Yu Jia remained unconscious, her coat and purse still with her. Yen let out a relieved breath, twisted her hair again, and changed back into her original appearance. Before leaving, Yen took out her mobile phone and snapped a few partially nude photos of Yu Jia before finally leaving her be. The effects of the drug didn't last long, and after waiting a little, Yu Jia woke up sluggishly, with a confused expression for a few seconds, then quickly reacted. She was so frightened that she sat up quickly, and asked Yen, "What did you do to me?" She waved the photos on her phone in front of her, adding, "Don't worry, as long as you are obedient, I'll delete these photos." Yu Jia gritted her teeth with hatred, "Teacher Yen, don't you think this is too much? I didn't offend you." "You can't be the judge of that," Yen sneered, picked up the purse and stood up, "I didn't offend you either, yet you helped others to deceive me." Yu Jia hurried forward and grabbed her mobile phone, she said angrily, "Delete the photos." Yen didn't fight her, she just stood at the door and watched Yu Jia rummage through her phone. Yen provoked her, "Don't waste your efforts. You can't open it." Suddenly Yu Jia smashed the phone to the ground, rushed over and stomped on it a few times. Looking at Yen provocatively, "Don't worry, Teacher Yen, I will get you a new phone." Yen glared at her coldly, with a smile and thought, "I was counting on that. At least I can escape surveillance for a few days." While walking outside the villa, Fu Xinqing stopped the car beside her. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and asked her, "Teacher He, here to have fun, as well?" She heard the words and pursed the corners of her lips and answered in a deep voice, "I came to find someone and I already did. I still have some urgent matters in school, so I'll leave first." But only 2 steps after, Jiang stood in front of her, blocking her way completely. Yen had to stop and turned around to look at Fu Xinqing. Fu Xinqing turned slightly, casting a side glance at her, he said unhurriedly, "Since you're here, don't rush to leave. Just play with me for a while and talk about it." Yen controlled her emotions, trying her best to maintain a calm attitude. The room had a table of mahjong in the corner, surrounded by 7 or 8 men. At the poker table, a man in his 20s waved to Fu Xinqing and called loudly, "Brother Xing, come and avenge me, they are teaming up to bully people." The man with a cigarette in his mouth smirked, "Brother Xing, come and save Xiao Wu. If you were a little later, Xiao Wu would have only his pants left." Showing a sincere smile, he walked over and sat down on Xiao Wu's seat, then looked up at Yen, and ordered, "Come and help me with the tiles." Xiao Wu stood up and offered a seat to Yen. Xiao Wu asked with a smile, "Is this the little sister-in-law Brother Xing just found for us?" Fu then smiled lightly, and added neither lightly nor seriously, "Teacher He has a husband, don't say nonsense." Husband? The surprise on Xiao Wu's face was 3 parts real and 7 parts fake. Fu Xinqing glanced at Yen, pulled the corners of his lips sarcastically, and urged her, "Sit here, play a few for me." When it was time to draw the tiles, he leaned beside her and said, "Isn't it hot to wear so thick?" She could only suppress her inner nervousness, force herself to be calm, and replied, "Not really." He leaned from behind her and whispered in her ear, "I'll let you go back when you get back all of Xiao Wu's money." She turned around, glanced at the chips in front of everyone, and began to read and play mahjong seriously. She had an excellent memory, almost imprinted in her mind, so she cooped up a lot of chips. Xiao Wu surprisingly asked, Brother Xing, where did you find this girl? In the last round Yen got the pair of K, seeing that Fu said, what are you waiting for, play? Yen gave him a side glance and said, trust me. Hearing that, Fu got little surprised. And immediately Yen said, pair K fold. The man with a cigarette smiled and said, indeed you are clever one, Miss Yen. He revealed his crads having ace pairs. Everyone on the table got shocked and praised her at her insight and decision. Fu Xinqing said nothing but just laughed out loud. Standing from her chair, Yen said, although I didn't win the last round, but overall it's a win, so can I leave now? But when she was leaving, Fu stopped her saying, initially I wanted to let you leave, but, before Fu says anything more, Yen intercepted him and said, I know Mr. Fu, I have to show some appreciation since I won money. Yen poured a glass with alcohol and drank it one go. Wiping her lips, she said, I hope everyone continues to have a good time, I shall take my leave. She glanced at Fu and said, Mr. Fu, I have matters to attend to, so I am leaving first. In the evening, after leaving the drinking party and slightly drunk, Fu Xinqing suddenly remembered He Yen. He instructed Ah Jiang, call He Yen and ask her to come over. Ah Jiang dialed He Yan's number and conveyed Fu Xinqing's request to her. He Yen requested to speak directly to Fu Xinqing on the phone. When Fu Xinqing took the phone, he could hear her voice, anguished and helpless, whispering, Fu Xinqing, I beg you to be merciful and let me go for a while today, okay? Today is my birthday. He hadn't known it was her birthday, and his surprise was evident in his voice as he responded with a soft sneer, well, now that I know, I can't help but say it, how about I come to your house to help you celebrate your birthday? Having been monitoring her for so long, he naturally knew where her parents lived. The car soon arrived in her neighborhood, and he called her again, I'm here. For the sake of your birthday, I'll give you two choices, either you come out by yourself, or I'll find you. It was a quiet winter night on a remote street, with few pedestrians. She looked around cautiously before eventually getting into the car and shutting the door. Suddenly, Fu Xinqing leaned over and kissed her. Startled, leaning back to evade him as she exclaimed, Fu Xinqing, what are you doing? Having sex, he replied matter-of-factly. Panicking, she begged painfully, close the door, not here. Fu Xinqing reached for the automatic button on the roof to close the door. His voice had grown lower and hoarser, take them off by yourself, it's better than having them ripped by me, don't you think? Her face turned deathly pale, her pupils dark and deep with accumulated anger and hatred. Slowly, she began to remove her clothes, her coat. But when she reached for her sweater, Fu Xinqing took her hand and leaned in slowly, his slightly drunken breath brushing against her neck. I'll do it. As he undressed her, he lingered on each part of her body, savoring it deliberately, as if cherishing a rare delicacy. Her patience had worn thin, and she asked through gritted teeth, what's the point? Can you hurry up? Suddenly, Fu Xinqing stopped and looked down at her, a mocking smile on his lips. Yen, your face isn't flushed, your breathing isn't erratic, and your heart isn't racing. You're good at acting, can't I get a more convincing reaction? She no longer had the strength to hate, she simply stared at him numbly and asked, then, what do you want me to do? What more do you want from me? Fu lowered his voice to her ear, crudely saying, I want you to beg me. Okay, I beg you, please, she repeated his words blankly. She closed her eyes, trying to convince herself. This man was not the despicable person she loathed, he was Liang Yuanze, her husband. She loved him and cherished every aspect of what they shared. Tears streamed down her face as she closed her eyes, and eventually, Fu Xinqing's torment came to an end. Swiftly, she gathered her clothes and covered her body, feeling a mix of shame and powerlessness. Fu Xinqing asked, a devilish smirk on his face, would you like to take a shower? She dressed quickly, her gaze downcast and apathetic. No, please take me back. My family is still waiting for me. The car's back door opened before it came to a full stop. He Yen didn't waste a moment, jumping out of the car and walking away without glancing back. However, she heard Fu Xinqing calling her from behind, Teacher Yen, be careful while walking. Don't let your husband notice anything amiss. Yen returned home with a weary look on her face. After reaching their home, Yuanze advised her, if you find the work too difficult, you should resign. After you complete your degree, you'll need to change jobs anyway, so don't overexert yourself for those students. You couldn't even have a decent birthday. Guilt and shame tormented her so much that she didn't dare to meet Yuanze's gaze, but she replied, it's just for now. It should be fine after a while. She stealthily locked herself in the bathroom, hiding within and crying for a long time. Eventually, she emerged from the bathroom. Yuenza, who was sitting in the living room watching TV, noticed that her eyes were red and asked, "What's wrong with your eyes?" "Nothing, I got shampoo in my eyes while washing my hair," she replied, looking as usual as she sat down beside him and leaned against his shoulder. After a while of silently staring at the TV screen, she blurted out without thinking, "Yuenza, let's get a divorce." Yuenza was taken aback. "What did you say?" She suddenly burst into laughter, laughing more and more. Yuenza asked in astonishment, "Yen, what's gotten into you? What are you laughing about?" Suppressing her laughter, she told him, "I'm just teasing you. Today, I heard a colleague tell a joke at school about a wife suddenly asking for a divorce, and we got all sorts of strange reactions, so we decided to go home and try it out." Yuenza reached out and pinched her cheek, saying, "You little rascal scared me. Don't make such jokes again. You can't casually mention the word divorce like that." Still holding his hand, she pressed on, "I haven't heard your answer yet." He asked, "About the divorce?" She nodded, her expression serious. "Yuenza, you have to give me an answer. If I say I want to divorce you, what would you do?" Yuenza furrowed his brows slightly and replied, "All right, I'll give you an answer. If you want a divorce because you no longer love me, I'll let you go because I love you. If you still love me but want a divorce due to other issues, then we'll deal with whatever problem it is. If I can solve it on my own, I'll do so. And if I can't solve it alone, I'll drag both of us to work through it together. Because we love each other." Yen leaned against his chest and said, "All right, we love each other." The next day, after getting a new mobile phone, Yen thought that the new phone wouldn't be monitored by him unless it was infected with a virus. She then headed to the school. When the school director saw Yen entering at this time, his expression turned stern as he reprimanded her. "Mrs. He, the economic forum starts officially tomorrow, foreign guests are arriving, and your students are all staying here. What reason do you have to run home?" Yen hung her head and honestly admitted her mistake. "I'm sorry, director. I'll be more punctual in the future." The director eased up upon seeing her admit her mistake. Her students were still around, observing her. Yen smiled and shrugged nonchalantly, "It's okay. Getting scolded is normal, by parents at home, by teachers at school, and even by bosses at work. Scolded here, scolded there, you get used to it." Her words brought laughter from the students. Yen playfully scolded while pointing at the kids, "Behave yourselves, don't cause trouble. I've tested the waters for you. If you still make mistakes, will you even deserve me?" "Never," everyone exclaimed in unison. She waved her hand, declaring, "Dismissed." Yen spent most of her time in a daze in a corner of the lobby, wondering if Fu Suiji would fall for her ruse and come find her, and if he did, when that would happen. In the afternoon, when she heard someone shouting "Mr. Fu" from a distance, she involuntarily flinched and turned her head to look, avoiding Fu Xinqing's gaze. He entered the lobby formally dressed, tall and slender, radiating handsome charm. He walked in surrounded by a few people, instantly drawing everyone's attention. Even a female student whispered in awe, "Wow, so handsome." A chill ran down Yan's spine, and she felt as if she were frozen in place. She couldn't move. He was led by the forum preparation staff and walked right past her. His indifferent gaze fell on her face, a subtle curl at the corner of his lips. But he didn't stop, he continued on to the elevator. She rushed to the information desk to check the information provided by the conference team. Sure enough, when she turned to the VIP guest section, she saw the line, "Fu Xinqing, President of Fu Corporation." Yen was slightly stunned, but she felt relieved that while he was here, he didn't come for her. It was unfortunate to see him, but also fortunate he hadn't come for her. Moreover, what she needed to be concerned about was making sure he didn't accidentally stumble upon her meeting with Fu Suiji. Suddenly a staff member rushed over to He Yen and said, "Teacher Yen, could you please assist in the Western restaurant? A foreign guest is having trouble ordering food and needs someone who can speak Spanish." Yen hurried over to the restaurant where the foreign guest was still gesturing and trying to communicate. Two volunteers stood beside him. She quickly approached the foreign guest and greeted him. After a few sentences, she smoothly shifted her accent. The foreign guest's face immediately lit up with pleasant surprise, and he began conversing with her animatedly. Some students watching from a distance whispered among themselves in secret. The first two sentences were in Spanish, but I didn't understand the rest. "Teacher," he spoke fluently. "She's really impressive." However, after Yen spoke a third language with the foreign guest, one student couldn't contain their excitement and exclaimed, "French. This is French. Teacher Yen speaks even better than our old teacher." After resolving the issue with the foreign guest, Yen sighed in relief. Then, someone inquired, "Teacher, you spoke Spanish for the first 2 sentences, and I understood that. I also recognized French at the end. But what language did you use in the middle? She kindly consoled the disappointed student, who was studying Spanish. It's Catalan. If you listen carefully, you can get a rough idea. Don't be nervous next time. The boy nodded eagerly and said with excitement, come on, Teacher Yen, you're amazing. You're our English department counselor, and we always thought you were an English major. Yen playfully dismissed the students, lowering her voice as she chuckled, this isn't the place for jokes. Hurry up and get back to work. You're praising me so highly, but I won't treat you to a meal here. While all this was happening, Fu Xinqing was observing Yen with a cold and expressionless face. Jiang asked indifferently, Mr. Fu, should we proceed with tonight's plan? Fu ordered, carry it out.